Have you ever wondered if someone, silently, loved you all these years, without you even knowing? Savannah never imagined that, when she was kicked out of her home at just 19, she was beginning the hardest and most transformative chapter of her life. That night, with a backpack on her back and teary eyes, she left behind not just her home, but her sense of belonging. Expelled by her own parents for loving the wrong person, she found herself alone, rejected, with her heart broken and her future completely blank. She wandered the streets in fear and shame. He tried to hide his crying, he tried to appear strong, but inside, everything hurt. The pain of being rejected by those who were supposed to protect her, the regret of having told too much, of having trusted at the wrong time, and the cruelest, the silence of the one she loved most. Eli, her first love, didn't show up that night. Not a call, not a message. It was as if everything had been a mistake, a discarded love, a worthless story. But time passed. Savannah did not surrender. With the little he had, he grabbed every opportunity tooth and nail. He worked in cafeterias, cleaned houses, sold sweets on the street, and each sleepless night created a strength within her that she didn't even know existed. Years later, she managed to open her own cafe. A simple corner, but full of life, where each cup served tasted like a new beginning. It was there, on an ordinary morning, between a batch of croissants and the soft sound of the radio, that Savannah looked out the window and froze. Across the street, standing silently, was him, Eli. The same eyes, the same way he puts his hands in his pockets when he's nervous. She didn't know how long he had been there, but something in his expression said it wasn't the first time. Savannah's heart beat faster. And, in that moment, everything she lived through, the nights crying, the years of silence, the buried love, began to bubble up again. As if, without even knowing it, someone had watched every step of your fight. And then, stories like this are not just about reunions. They're about strength, silence, and everything that happens when no one is watching. When someone interacts with a video like this, it shows that there is still room for what is true. A simple like strengthens this message. Subscribing ensures more intense stories like this keep coming to you. Because what comes next will change even more what has been stored for years. Savannah was just 19 when she heard the words she never thought would come from her own mother. "You don't live here anymore." It was as if the ground had been ripped from under his feet. She didn't scream. He didn't beg. He just picked up the backpack that had been ready the day before, perhaps because, deep down, he already felt that this moment was coming. Everything she had fit inside, some clothes, a hairbrush, and an old photo where she still believed her family was the safest place in the world. But that day, that place became a closed door. Since she was little, Savannah has always been the type of girl who feels too much. He was moved by the sad stories in films, he wrote letters that he never sent and dreamed of a world where love was stronger than any imposed rule. But he grew up in a home where feeling was weakness, where there was no talk about love, only about expectations. She needed to be perfect, in her grades, in her behavior, in her choices. And loving someone who wasn't approved by their parents was unacceptable. The problem is that her heart already had an owner. Eli lived on the back street. He was that type of boy who didn't fit into her family's standards. He worked in his uncle's workshop, lived with his sick father, and wore grease-stained clothes. But he had a sweet look, a calming laugh, and the kind of presence that made Savannah feel whole. They met in secret, hiding in the school's abandoned backyard. They laughed, they dreamed, they promised the impossible, until the day they were caught. And nothing, absolutely nothing, was the same as before. The night of her expulsion was recorded in every cell of her body. Eli's silence, who didn't appear. The father's hard look. The mother, crying, but without stopping her daughter from leaving. Savannah walked aimlessly for hours. The cold seemed to have invaded inside. She didn't know where to sleep, what to eat, who to call. She sat in a square and stayed there, hugging her own legs, trying to understand how love could be such a big mistake in the eyes of those who were supposed to protect her. In the following days, pride spoke louder. She didn't want to go back or beg for help. He knocked on unknown doors, offered himself for any type of work. He washed dishes, organized stock at markets, carried boxes at fairs. He slept in shelters, then in a small room rented in exchange for cleaning. Eli's face appeared in his thoughts like a blur: love, disappointment, silence. She wanted to forget him. I wanted to believe that he didn't know what to do, that he was afraid. But it also hurt to think that maybe he just didn't love her enough. But Savannah didn't stop. One day at a time, she built something. She met generous people along the way, women who had also been expelled, abandoned, silenced. These stories began to heal wounds. They showed that she was not alone, that there was a hidden strength in every woman who has ever heard you're no good and decided to follow through. Anyway, and it was with this strength that she began to dream again. Not with love, but with freedom. Years later, Savannah got a steady job at a small coffee shop. She was good at what she did. She knew how to listen to customers, remember preferences, create a welcoming environment. Little by little, she gained the owner's trust, then became a partner, and finally, bought the place. He renovated it, gave it a new name, put books on the shelves and fresh flowers on the tables. That cafe became the heart of the neighborhood. But no one there knew its history. No one imagined how much pain she had to swallow in silence to get there. And yet, every day, there was something inside her that whispered questions that were never answered. Why did Eli disappear? Why didn't you go after it? Was he also forced to retreat? Or has he forgotten her completely? Savannah didn't look for answers. He didn't write letters. Don't stalk social media. He did what he always did, took a deep breath and moved on. Until that morning. It was an ordinary Tuesday. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. The radio was playing an old song. She cleaned tables while smiling at regular customers. Until, in an automatic movement, he looked out the window. And he saw it. A man standing across the street, tall, with his hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on her. For a few seconds, Savannah thought it was a mistake. But when his eyes met hers, everything stopped. Time, sounds, the world. Because in that instant, she knew it was Eli. And the way he looked at her left no doubt. He never really left. This reunion was not just visual. It was visceral. As if the past had been patiently waiting for that moment. And now, there, standing before the woman who learned to live without him, was the boy who promised eternal love and disappeared. What did he feel? Why was it there now? What did he know? Savannah couldn't move a muscle. I could only feel, and everything I felt was old, but alive. And this is the time when questions begin to bubble within those watching. Because stories like this are not just entertainment. They are mirrors. They are bridges with memories that still hurt, with people who still live in some corner of the soul. Abandonment, forbidden love, silent overcoming, unexpected reunion, all of this carries emotion, truth, and a need to be heard. Therefore, this video goes beyond a narrative. He's about everything that got choked up. About what was not said. About people who were ripped from our lives without explanation. When someone interacts with this story, they are not just watching. It's giving a voice to those who never had a chance to speak. Each like is a sign that there are still hearts that feel. Each entry strengthens this space for real stories that touch and transform. And now, there is a compelling reason to leave a comment here. Because maybe you've experienced something similar. Maybe you know someone who also had to rebuild alone. Or maybe this reunion stirs something you thought you had already forgotten. Sharing this, here in the comments, is like reaching out to someone who also needs to know that they are not alone. Savannah was still standing there, trying to understand what that look meant, when the door to the cafe opened. Savannah, however, was still there. And as the seconds ticked by, he realized that Eli wasn't moving. He just looked at her, as if time had stopped for both of them. As if all the years of absence, silence and pain had culminated in that frozen moment between what was and what could have been. But before this unexpected reunion happened, the road that brought her there was much more difficult than anyone could have imagined. When he left home at 19, he didn't just have a backpack on his back. It also took the pain of having been rejected by her own parents, the weight of a love they deemed inappropriate, and the shame of being put out as if it were a mistake that needed to be erased. Savannah was sensitive, intense, had dreams and a heart that believed in true love. But life showed that this, for some, was too dangerous. The relationship with Eli, the boy from the back street, was the last straw. When her mother found out, there were screams, threats, broken promises, and then, the definitive silence. The door closed behind Savannah with a bang that echoed for years inside her. In the first few days, she didn't know where to go. He slept on park benches, in bus stations, wherever he could. At night, I cried myself to sleep. During the day, I wandered around looking for something that made sense. And so, broken and exhausted, she found a community shelter. It wasn't a pretty place, but there she had a bed, food and, for a few hours, a roof over her head. She met women with stories as tough as hers, some even worse. Women who lost children, husbands, identity. And it was by listening to these stories that she began, without even realizing it, to rebuild herself. From within, she learned to manage. He cleaned offices, carried bags for the elderly, sold sweets at school doors. Each coin was a piece of his freedom. But it was on a rainy day, while trying to take shelter under the awning of a bakery, that he met Lydia, a lady with kind eyes and a keen instinct for sensing disguised sadness. Lydia offered a snack and a chat. And there a bridge was born. Not a salvation, but a possibility. The elderly woman needed help at home, Savannah needed a place. And so, simply, they began to walk together. Lydia's townhouse was old, full of souvenirs hanging on the walls and cabinets full of souvenirs. Savannah started to live there, in exchange for services. And while she was cleaning, cooking and taking care of the garden, she was also reorganizing her own story. Little by little, the routine brought meaning, and along with confidence came the desire to dream again. Lydia had a habit of drinking tea in the late afternoon and telling stories about when she was young. Savannah listened carefully. It was as if those words prepared her for a future she couldn't even imagine yet. One day, while going out to buy ingredients, he saw a small sign in the window of a coffee shop, "Attendant wanted, part-time." The heart accelerated. That seemed like little, but for those who had never had anything, it was a world. He entered, with nervousness in his skin and hope in his eyes. She was received by Mr. Bernard, a calm gentleman who understood more than he said. He listened to her story without judgment, and decided to give her a chance. He said he would start the next morning, as a test. Savannah left with a shy smile on her face and a discreet twinkle in her eyes. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in the right place. The days at the cafe were intense. She needed to learn quickly, deal with demanding customers, keep the environment clean and organized. But there was something about Savannah that went beyond efficiency, her sensitivity. She memorized the names of her customers, their favorite coffees, the stories they heard while drinking their cups, created bonds, and these ties began to attract more people. Before long, customers came not just for the coffee, but for her. Bernard noticed this. He entrusted more tasks, gave autonomy, and Savannah responded with dedication. It was clear that the place was gaining a soul, and the soul was hers. When Bernard decided to retire and move to another city, it was almost inevitable. He offered her to take over the business. Savannah was floored. He was afraid, of course, but he also felt proud, because in that space, she had left her tears, her learning, her strength. Lydia helped with what she could. A small loan covered the basics, and Savannah transformed the place. He put up light curtains, live plants, exchanged books. It created a welcoming environment. You're a refuge. A space where other loners could feel like they belonged. And so Café Solis was born. For a long time, that was his life. Tending tables, listening to customers' stories, smiling even on cloudy days. But at night, when I closed the door and turned off the lights, the longing returned. Missing a part that remained pending, a love that never had an answer. She rarely spoke about Eli. She kept that story like someone keeping a never-sent letter. And even if she tried to follow, there were nights when his face appeared in her dreams. Not as pain, but as absence. And that was why, seeing him there, across the street, the impact was so strong. Because it wasn't just him. It was everything he stood for. The girl who was expelled, the loneliness that came after, the silence that was never explained. His look said so much, and at the same time, nothing. Savannah didn't know what to do. Time seemed suspended. Eli neither approached nor retreated. It just remained, like an old question finally coming back to be answered. Minutes dragged by. Customers continued to enter. The smell of coffee still filled the air. But to her, everything seemed distant. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held the tray. The body was present, but the soul was on that sidewalk, years ago, trying to understand why he never showed up. And now, it was there. The same messy hair, more mature, perhaps sadder eyes. Savannah wanted to run. I wanted to hug. I wanted to run away. All at the same time, but it stayed. Because after all, she had learned that facing the pain was the only way to let it go. And in that instant, she knew something was about to change forever. Eli didn't know exactly why, but every morning, without fail, his feet took him there. Before the sun had even fully risen, he was crossing the sidewalks, still damp from the dawn, with his shoulders hunched and his hands buried in the pockets of his worn-out jacket. He stopped on the other side of the street, leaning against the same post, always at the same time. He didn't ask for coffee. He didn't cross the street. He didn't try to see more than he was allowed. He just watched, in silence, as if, for a few minutes, he could inhabit a world where she was still there, and everything that was broken had never happened. Café Solis was small, but for him it was a beacon. Through the large glass window, I saw the lights being turned on, the first customers arriving, the gentle movement of the morning forming. And at the center of it all, her, Savannah. Even far away, Eli recognized every gesture, every curve of that body that he once held trembling with love. Even after so long, she was still her. Maybe different, maybe more mature, but still unmistakable. Eli carried the look of someone who lost more than he could bear, but he never let that loss turn him into someone bitter. On the contrary, he chose to remain silent, out of love. Since the day Savannah was kicked out, he has never been the same. There wasn't a single moment in which his absence didn't weigh on every detail of his routine. The night it all happened was also the night he discovered there were forces much greater than his will. When her parents knocked on his door, shouting, accusing, threatening, he tried to argue, tried to explain. But nothing he said would change what they had already decided. He was the mistake, the one to blame, the one responsible for destroying their daughter. The pain in Savannah's mother's eyes was worse than any words. And at that moment, he understood that any attempt to get closer would only cause more wounds. He wrote letters, several. He tore them all up. He called countless times, but hung up before the second ring. He went to the shelter where he heard she was, but didn't have the courage to go in. Because deep down, I didn't think I deserved to be forgiven. Even loving, even suffering, Eli felt that his love had caused too much suffering. Then he retreated. But it didn't go away. He continued living in the neighborhood, continued taking care of his sick father, continued repairing cars at the corner shop. And he continued to love Savannah from afar. Every day, the sound of the cafe bell was a reminder that she was there, that she survived. Who moved on? Eli saw the place change, the flowers in the window appear, the colors on the walls transform. He followed every detail of the evolution of that place like someone watching life happen outside their own window. And as much as he felt like crossing the street, opening the door and saying everything he had held back for years, something kept him rooted to the ground. The fear of reopening wounds, the fear of not being welcome, and, above all, guilt. He wondered, silently, if she hated him, if he still remembered, if she ever knew that he tried, that he suffered. I wondered if her hands still shook when she talked about the past, if there was another, if time had erased what they were. But the truth is that, even without answers, he couldn't move away. It was as if that piece of sidewalk was the only way to still be close. As if, by being there, he could at least make sure she was okay. Eli knew that Savannah had built something precious. He saw the affection of customers, the lightness of smiles, the respect of neighbors. She was admired. She was strong. But he also knew that no one there knew the full story. No one knew about the crying dawns, the basement where she slept, the silent fights. And that, for him, only increased the admiration. Because she didn't use the pain as a shield, she turned the pain into a bridge. And every morning, when he watched her, he asked himself, how can someone who has been so hurt still be so luminous? The love Eli felt was never erased. It was just silenced. He loved with the weight of absence, with the pain of waiting, with the contained desire of someone who knows that perhaps he no longer has a place. But it didn't need to be seen to feel it. It was enough to know that she existed, that she was okay. And that, for him, was everything. But that morning, something changed. He wasn't the one who broke the silence. It was her. Savannah saw him. For the first time, their eyes met. And the world, which had followed parallel tracks for so long, finally seemed to find a point of collision. Eli felt the impact in his chest like an unexpected punch. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should smile, wave, run away. But he knew, with absolute certainty, that there was no longer any way to pretend that nothing had happened. Because when Savannah saw him, something in her moved too. It wasn't just a surprise. It was memory. It was longing. It was that kind of pain that time cannot erase. And even if years had passed, even if she had followed, that look said it all. He said there were still questions. He said there was still a half-finished story. And that maybe, just maybe, it was time to turn the page that was never read. Savannah was still trying to process what had just happened. Seeing Eli across the street, after so long, had been like opening a locked door from inside her, a door she swore would never open again. That night, even though he tried to distract himself with the bustle of the cafe, with the orders piling up on the counter and the laughter of customers in the background, his mind wouldn't stop. His look was etched in her memory with an almost cruel clarity. It was as if all the feelings she had buried, one by one, were now asking to come out. But Savannah wasn't the girl she used to be. He learned to control his emotions, to keep his heart under control. She wasn't going to chase anyone. No more. The days passed. She didn't see him again. He began to wonder if he hadn't imagined it all. Maybe it was just a resemblance, a familiar face from another life. But something inside her said no. Which was him? That feeling in your chest, that tight anguish, could only come from a true presence. And then, on a gray Tuesday morning, when the city was still stretched out between the clouds and the first drops of rain scratched the glass of the cafe, he entered. Savannah had her back turned, making a latte, when she heard the sound of the doorbell opening. It was a common sound. It happened dozens of times a day. But in that instant, a shiver ran down his spine. Something in the atmosphere changed. The air felt heavier, denser, as if it had stopped circulating for a second. She turned around slowly, on instinct, and when her eyes met his, time stopped. Eli was there, in front of her. The same look, now more intense, more vivid, more charged. The features were marked, the wrinkles of worry and longing seemed to be carved with iron into the skin. But it was still him, and Savannah knew. Instantly, I knew. Because no other look in the world would make her heart beat like that. He smiled slightly, hesitantly, almost afraid. And then he said, "Hi, Savannah." She got stuck. For a moment, he forgot where he was, who he was, what he was doing. His hand still held the mug of steamed milk, but his fingers were shaking. His voice, that sound she had heard in her dreams for so many years, was real. Low, soft, but loaded with a weight that only those who have loved and lost know. The two stared at each other for seconds that seemed like forever. The cafe was still alive around it, but everything was distant. The only thing that existed at that moment was him. And her. Eli took a step forward, as if unsure if he was welcome. Savannah took a deep breath, blinked rapidly, trying to find something to say. But the words just wouldn't come. The past was there, between the two, hanging in the air like a storm about to break. He didn't try to get any closer. Just ordered a coffee. His voice broke on the first syllable, then he started again, "An espresso, please." She still didn't move. The employee next door noticed the strange silence and intervened, taking the order, but Eli couldn't take his eyes off her. Savannah finally turned back to the coffee machine. He tried to breathe, organize his thoughts, hide what he felt. But each movement was automatic, as if the body worked out of habit while the mind was far away, in the schoolyard where they were hiding, in the square where they kissed for the first time, on the night he didn't show up. When he returned with the espresso, he placed it in front of him carefully. And it was only then that he said, "Why?" It was a whispered, almost imperceptible question. But he listened, and she knew he had heard. Because at that moment, his eyes filled with water. He didn't cry. Not there. But the emotion was visible. The hardened face trembled, the mouth twitched, as if every word choked for years tried to come out at the same time. He held the cup, as if he needed to anchor himself to something physical, and said, "I wanted it. I wanted it more than anything. But I was a boy. And I thought I loved you enough to protect you, by staying away." Savannah felt the impact like a dull thump in her chest. His words, even though they were soft, carried a burden that was difficult to process. She wanted to scream, to say that he had chosen silence when she needed a voice most. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore what I saw there. Truth, pain, repentance, and love. Yes, there was still love. It was in the way he looked at her, in the care with each word, in the tremor of his hands. And that disarmed her. They remained there, face to face, like two strangers who knew everything about each other but didn't know how to start over. The past still weighed heavily, but for the first time, there was a silver lining. An opening to say what has been held back for too long. Savannah, her voice firmer, asked, "Why now?" And Eli, without hesitation, replied, "Because I couldn't live on the other side of the street anymore." The impact of those words was like a silent earthquake. Because there was the answer she always wanted to hear. He never left, never stopped loving. He just remained silent. And that silence, now, had finally been broken. Savannah felt her eyes water, but she blinked quickly. She didn't want him to see how much it still affected her. "I wanted to understand. I needed to understand." Eli continued, "I saw you blossom. I saw you fall and get up. I knew everything, even from afar. And every step you took made me love you more. But fear, the fear of getting in your way, of hurting you again, paralyzed me." Savannah listened to everything in silence, feeling each word like a breath and a wound at the same time. He was in front of the boy he loved and the man he had become. And the two of them still existed there, in front of her, asking for forgiveness without kneeling. The coffee shop was still buzzing around. Customers laughed, talked, took photos of the cafes decorated with foam art. But none of that existed for her. At that moment, there was only him, and everything that wasn't said. Everything that could finally be said. The cup between them grew cold. But the conversation had barely begun. The silence between the two seemed more eloquent than any words spoken so far. It was a silence full of the past, of unspoken memories, of feelings that resisted time and absence. Savannah kept her eyes fixed on Eli, and he, still holding the cup with both hands, seemed to carry the weight of each of the years that had passed without explanation. The slight tremor in his fingers revealed that this conversation was as necessary for him as it was for her. But unlike her, he chose to wait for the right moment, hoping it would be possible to start over. Savannah, her heart pounding in her throat, took a deep breath. He was there, in front of the love of his youth, in front of who had been his first choice, his greatest pain and, cruelly, his greatest abandonment. And now, he spoke. With a low, slow voice, as if measuring each word before releasing it into the world, Eli began, "I never really left. The street kept me close, but fear kept me away. And that is something I carry every day." The words came out with difficulty, as if each sentence was a step in a minefield of emotions. "I saw you enter this cafe. I saw when you smiled. I saw when you cried hiding behind the counter. And every time I thought about crossing that street, something grabbed me. It wasn't cowardice, Savannah. It was love. A love that I didn't know how to deserve after everything you've been through because of me. She felt a lump in her throat. The anger she thought she had overcome returned with a vengeance. How could he talk about love after leaving her alone? How could he call her mine when he didn't even fight for her? But at the same time, there was something in his eyes, that broken glow, the raw pain, that screamed regret. And more than that, true. Savannah leaned against the counter, as if she needed something firm to hold on to. The whole world was spinning around them, but she couldn't think about anything other than that scene. His body shook, not with fear, but with emotion. I felt the tension accumulated over all the years spreading through my chest, burning inside, trying to find a way out. And then she spoke. Not with fury, but with a calm, contained pain, the pain of someone who learned to keep quiet when everything hurt too much. Did you know that I waited for you that night? Until the last minute, I believed that you would appear. That you would say something, anything. But you disappeared. Eli lowered his eyes. The shame was visible. He seemed to shrink, as if he wanted to hide from his own past. I know. And that's the weight I've carried since that day. I saw your parents leaving my house. I saw the hate in their eyes. And I was just a boy. I thought that if I walked away, if I didn't provoke more conflict, maybe they would take you back. Maybe you would have a chance at a normal life. But I was wrong. And that mistake has haunted me ever since. The tears began to stream down Savannah's face, silent, steady, freeing. She had no idea how much she still needed to hear that. For so long, she imagined that he had simply left her out of weakness, out of a lack of love. Now she heard that his absence had also been a form of love, distorted, silent, but still love. And that confused her. Disarmed. It left her vulnerable. Every day, when I saw you here, I wanted to cross the street. But I felt like you didn't need me anymore. That I would only get in the way. You built this place, Savannah. You remade yourself. And I stood by, watching you be stronger than anyone ever imagined. And yet, I never stopped loving you. Never. His voice broke on the last word. It was as if the confession was too big to fit inside him. Savannah didn't respond immediately. I was in a trance. Her mind went back to each dawn when she cried his name, to each doubt that haunted her for years. And now he was there, saying that he suffered, that he loved, that he never left. All of this was too much to take in at once. But one thing was certain, something inside her was beginning to open, like a flower touched by the sun after a winter too long. Anger gave way to longing, longing mixed with fear. And the fear, little by little, was replaced by something new. A silent relief. Because, even without knowing what she would do from there, Savannah felt that part of that pain was finally finding space to breathe. She looked into Eli's eyes, wiped away her tears with the back of her hand, and said, almost in a whisper, I don't know if I can forgive you now. But, thank you for coming, for saying it. Eli nodded. He didn't ask for haste. He didn't ask for more. He just accepted that moment for what it was, a possible new beginning, even if uncertain. They stayed there for a few more minutes, in silence. A different silence than before. No longer a silence of distance, but of connection. A space between two souls that still recognized each other, despite time, despite wounds, despite everything. And as the afternoon wore on, Savannah realized that this reunion wasn't the end of the story. It was the point where everything that was trapped in the past finally began to be released. Eli didn't say anything else, and neither does Savannah. His cup was still there, forgotten, with the coffee now cold and untouched. It wasn't about the taste. It was about silence. A silence that, for the first time in so many years, didn't hurt. A silence that allowed her heart to breathe differently. As if, after years of living on the defensive, she could finally lower her shoulders and admit to herself that there was a feeling that never left, it was just stored away. Eli didn't leave immediately. He stood there, observing the environment she created, the care taken in every detail, the delicacy of the flowers, the pictures on the walls, the words written on the menu. Everything there was Savannah. Everything there carried layers of overcoming, of longing, of beauty born of pain. He looked around as if trying to memorize that place with his eyes. as if he wanted to take away not just the image, but the feeling. Savannah, in turn, just watched. I still didn't know what I wanted from him. There were still hurts somewhere deep. There were still questions. But there was also something new forming, a shy tenderness, a desire to understand, to make space for what could perhaps still be. Eli stood up. He thanked her with a restrained, respectful gesture. He didn't ask to see her again. He didn't insist. He just left a coin and a note on the table. He left as he arrived, in silence, with his shoulders slightly bowed, but with his eyes a little more at peace. Savannah waited a few minutes before taking the paper. When he opened it, he found few words. Simple but profound words. I didn't come back to ask for it. I came back to deserve it. She folded the note carefully, like someone keeping a piece of her own heart, and placed it in the counter drawer, along with other souvenirs she had collected without realizing it. I didn't know what I would do with it, but I knew it wasn't the end. Whatever Eli had awakened, he would not die there. There was something that still pulsed. Something that, even after years, still asked for space. Over the next few days, Savannah followed her routine. He served coffee, arranged tables, smiled at customers. But something about her was different, as if his visit had shaken not just memories, but the structure of what she believed about love, about forgiveness, about herself. He began to notice details that had previously gone unnoticed. The couples who touched each other lightly, the shy smiles of reunions, the looks of those who didn't need to say anything to be understood. All of this took on new meaning, because she, finally, understood. Eli did not return the next day. Not in the other. But Savannah felt he was close by. Not just physically. It was present in the way she thought of him when she woke up, in the way she remembered the words he chose, in the pain that, little by little, turned into calm. It wasn't a new love. It was a love that survived in silence. A love that remained deep in the soul, waiting for the right moment to return to the surface. She didn't run to him, and he didn't demand anything from her. It was as if they both understood that starting over, when it comes to true love, doesn't have to be the same as before. There's no need to be urgent. It just needs to be true. And they both still had that. In time, Eli returned to the cafe, not with grandiose words, but with simple gestures. A book left on the table with a discreet note, a coffee paid for before she arrived, a bouquet of wildflowers left at the door before opening. Little things, but in each of them, there was a silent request to be part of it again. Not like the boy from before, but like the man who now understood what he lost, what it cost, what could still flourish. Savannah didn't ignore it. He also did not surrender immediately. She had learned to protect what was left of her own heart, but I had also learned not to deny what touches the soul so sincerely. And so, without rushing, she made room. A coffee together at the back table. A conversation about the past that hurt, but also taught. A look that said more than excuses. And little by little, the bridges were being rebuilt. Not in a hurry, but carefully. She understood that going back to someone doesn't mean erasing the pain. It means choosing to write a new chapter where the mistakes of the past are not repeated, but remembered as part of what shaped who we became. Eli saw it blossom from afar. Now I had the chance to walk alongside. And this time, it wouldn't be in secret. It would be with eyes in the eyes, with presence, with dedication. At the end of that month, as she quietly closed the coffee shop, as she had done since day one, Savannah felt something different in the air. It wasn't just the tiredness of a full day, nor the tranquility of the night that enveloped the street with its yellow lights. It was a new peace. A gentle feeling that, for the first time in a long time, the world around her seemed in harmony with what she carried inside her chest. She turned off the lights, wiped the last counter, and, before turning the key in the door, she saw something stuck between the hinges, a flower. Simple, wild, just like the ones Eli left when he still didn't have the courage to enter. Beside it, a note with just one sentence written by hand, in shaky but firm letters. "Can I come by and pick you up tomorrow at 7 p.m.? Savannah smiled. Not that automatic smile of service or politeness, but a sincere, whole smile that seemed to come from a deep and forgotten place. She didn't need to think much. He took the note, put it in his pocket and walked to the sidewalk with light steps, as if recognizing his own path after being away from home for a long time. The next day, at 7 p.m. sharp, he was there. Eli wore a simple shirt, held a discreet bouquet in his hands and had a mix of respect and hope in his eyes. Savannah walked down the steps slowly. I didn't say anything. He just walked up to him and, with a natural gesture, accepted the arm he extended. They walked side by side down the street, without a clear direction, but certain that wherever they went, it was no longer alone. The days that followed were like learning a new dance with familiar steps. An unpretentious dinner turned into an afternoon of sightseeing. A conversation about the past turned into a silent Sunday afternoon, just watching the city go by. It wasn't a rush. It wasn't necessary. It was presence. It was wanting. It was love, rediscovered with maturity, with truth, with the delicacy that only time teaches. As the months passed, Eli became part of Savannah's routine, not as a ghost of the past, but as a living part of the present. He helped with shopping at the coffee shop, showed up in the mornings with warm croissants, created bonds with customers, learned their favorite drinks. She became a constant, firm, and, above all, chosen presence. She no longer needed to guess about feelings, nor carry the weight of absence alone. He was there, whole, available, ready to be again, but now, better. Their story, previously interrupted, gained new chapters. A mature relationship, built on respect, listening and the certainty that loving is also knowing how to wait, knowing how to repair, knowing how to remain. Savannah learned that she didn't need to erase the pain of the past to have the right to happiness. He learned that it was possible to rebuild, not over the wounds, but around them, with care and time. And Eli, in turn, learned that love is not just a feeling, it is responsibility. It's choice. It's courage. Months later, during the coffee shop's 2-year anniversary, Savannah organized a little party. The oldest customers, the neighbors, the friends, everyone was there. Soft music, lights hanging from trees, tables with fresh flowers. And in the middle of all this, Eli stood on the small improvised stage next to the counter and, with his voice cracking but firm, he simply said, "It took me a long time to learn that who we love, we care for. But today, I just want everyone to know that the strongest woman I know is also the love of my life." Savannah, in the middle of the crowd, felt her heart warm. She walked up to him, held his hand and kissed him there, in front of everyone. Not because of the romantic gesture itself, but because now, she knew this was where he belonged. Next to her. No longer as an unresolved chapter, but as part of the present she chose to live. A few months later, Eli brought something new. He found an old property on the back street, the same one where they met. With Savannah's help, he renovated the place and opened a small bookstore cafe. An old dream, shared since adolescence, was finally taking shape. She took care of the coffee, he took care of the books, and together, they took care of the stories that passed through their hands, knowing that theirs, among all, was one of the most unlikely, and, for that very reason, one of the most real. Savannah didn't go back to the past, but it also didn't leave him in the dark. They started again with timid steps, certain that they did not need to erase what had been experienced. Sometimes true love doesn't need to be new, it just needs to be true. She thought she had lost everything, but fate was just waiting for the right moment to bring love back. And this time, she was ready to live, with open eyes, steady hands, and a heart that, finally, felt at home. Stories like this speak to those who truly feel. Anyone who has come this far carries within them a heart that recognizes the value of love that endures, forgiveness that heals, and the silent strength of those who start over. This channel is made for those who live intensely, for those who value what is deep, real, and unforgettable. Being subscribed is ensuring that more stories like this continue to arrive, touch, transform. Anyone who has read or listened to the end knows, some stories deserve to be felt more than once. So leave it in the comments, there is still love that waits. So we know that you also believe in the power of a reunion. And when one story ends with a lighter heart, another begins with a new sparkle in the eyes. In the next video, a new plot full of emotion, new beginnings, and unexpected bonds will touch even deeper points. A story is coming that you won't forget, the kind that stays with you long after the end.